What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 348. My name is Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts, and as always, I'm joined by
Ron.
And John, and I'm glad to see you.
Look at that. He's got a little,
Look at that.
little zinger there. I like it. Super happy to be here, obviously.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This does feel like a hard-fought episode. We had
man.
we had like a one-day postponement last week, and then we had like the bad weather that was actually knocking out people's electricity and air conditioning, and then we here we are finally.
We made it.
Yeah, made it, man.
And some of those problems are still unresolved.
Yes, we have AC in our house right now that the guy came out and he basically said, I'm surprised this could possibly work, but he was able to literally wiggle the wires.
They just kick it
on this control panel. But I mean, like, that's what I was getting ready to do today.
Yeah,
the guy came back out and wiggled the wires again and said the part should be here soon. But it's like, we really think that like it was working fine. And then when it reached the temperature, because like they fixed it and then it was running and we were starting to celebrate like, oh my God, it's so nice in this house again. And then like we think that the machine like shutting down, it shuddered and shook the wire. I mean, I think it's that delicate of a thing.
It's that
like
sensitive,
that starting or stopping it would be enough. So I mean, I could go out there and, shake a wire and hope I was doing something, but I could also probably shock myself. So I'm just going to wait for that part to come in. But yes, right now we have air. So it's amazing how much you like your house again when you can go to any part of it and not be just sweating. I was going to say like a pig or like a dog, but neither of those animals sweat. We really should pick an animal that sweats.
Yeah.
I'll be right back with you guys on that. How's everybody doing?
Yeah, go research that. I'm doing good, man. It's good to see you guys.
Yeah, man. It's good. We're back in the swing of things, man.
Yeah.
It was good.
Anybody want to take a guess? The sweatiest animals?
Pigs.
Neither one surprises me. Well, pigs don't sweat. Pigs roll in the mud to cool off.
Ooh.
I didn't know that.
Dogs pant instead of sweating. That's why dogs are always on that tip.
Shit.
No clue.
Just think of an animal that you might think of as running and like slick with sweat, and you might even have heard about this animal being
Sweaty.
a horse. Horse is one of the sweatiest animals.
Okay.
But the other one I would say that's no big surprise is the hippo. Apparently perspires quite a bit too.
They sweat.
Wow.
Huh? Interesting.
We never have guessed it.
Horses and hippos.
Horses and hippos.
Yeah. So next time someone says,
I feel like that's the name. That's the new name of the podcast. That's the new.
Horses and hippos.
That's your next album, John.
Next time someone says I sweat like a pig, though, say, actually, don't you mean you sweat like a hippo or a horse? And accept either one.
That's nuts.
Oh man. All right, cool. Well, got a pretty awesome podcast lined up here today. We're gonna go talk about some of this. Last week there's a bit of a shakeup in the streaming and theatrical world with Warner Discovery kind of making these huge announcements about what they're doing with their streaming platforms, what they're doing with some of the movies that are in production, shows in production, movies that are already pretty much done. So we're going to talk a little bit about that here at the top of the show. Then we'll get into our required viewing selection this week, which was Ronald's pick. And then we'll go into the new Hulu film, the new Hulu original film, Prey, which came out last Friday, which is a Predator prequel directed by Dan Trachtenberg, who we talked about before with 10 Cloverfield Lane, but he also did like the pilot episode for The Boys. But he's, kind of becoming more and more known with each thing he does. So we'll talk about that a lot more here at the end of the episode or towards the back half of the episode. But yeah, so let's jump into this. We kind of had going back on our thread last week, just sharing like links and posts and tweets and stuff like back and forth. Even before Warner had their like kind of presentation towards the end of the week on Thursday. Well, I think it was their earnings call. I think it was, but I guess the thing that kind of kicked it off, there were some rumblings even in the weeks prior with some shows that were canceled or shows that were not renewed. Some shows that were like some animated shows that were already completed that had basically just been shelved. Even announcements that basically they weren't going to be doing a lot of pursuit of like family programming on HBO Max anymore, unless there was some sort of financial incentive. But the big thing that happened last week was that they basically announced that they were taking Batgirl, which is was an upcoming DC property that was exclusively for HBO Max, was a Max original. directed by Adil Bilal, who got the guys that did the Bad Boys 3, Bad Boys 3 feature back in 2020, and it's never going to come out. It's not coming out on HBO Max. It's not coming out on theaters. They can't sell it and release it any other way because it has something to do with some sort of loophole
A
tax
tax
incentive.
write-off, yeah. It's like
Yeah,
if
but
it's going
but
to be a write-off, they can't release it in any form, basically.
right, but the write-off that they're taking advantage of is something that they had to take advantage of within a period of time of the merger.
Yeah.
So these things that they're doing, whether it's Batgirl, and they also announced that the Scoob sequel, which was I think a Halloween themed sequel, um, basically the same fate is shared by both. With both movies were basically done and deep in post production, done shooting for the most part, I believe, and yeah, just like lit the social media on fire by making these announcements, specifically the Batgirl, just because of what it was to be for these Max originals and the idea of having this content in the DC world, on their streaming platform, and it's no more, and the whole pivot is a pretty big one, and the more information that came out on Thursday, kind of made the picture a little clearer. But I mean, what were you guys thinking, when we started going back and forth about these announcements? I guess start with Batgirl specifically, and just kind of what that means for HBO Max or streaming or just theatrical. There's just such a lot. There's so much to talk about. Just we'll try to condense it as much as possible here at the top of the show. But first takes, first feelings when you saw that article that kind of broke about Batgirl. I guess John, start with your initial take on it.
I mean, there is this level of production value that they put into sort of the CW shows that are kind of that people like because it's an extension of a kind of connected universe,
right?
And then they announced all these HBO Max projects, or they started announcing them. I mean, there's been a few things that sound like maybe they're going to be prestige projects, like they're connected to the Batman film,
right?
But there's also this kind of level where the Batgirl movie seemed like it was going to exist in between maybe the world of like the CW style and quality level and the movies. It always seemed like maybe it was going to be a disconnected universe or something, like maybe they're not going to try to link it up to their cinematic, whatever they're trying to do cinematically that is very vague at this point anyway.
Right.
And so the fact that it was pitched, I think the Blue Beetle movie was similarly announced as like it was going to be an HBO Max original. And so it just makes you think, well, maybe they're going to have a chance to do something that's a little bit of a different level, doesn't have the pressure of one of these huge tentpole movies on it, but can bring some of these other characters in. So I mean, I don't think my hopes were necessarily that high about this movie. It became more intriguing to me when I heard that, who was involved on the creative side, that these are people like they had done a couple episodes of Miss Marvel too, the directing team. So there's this evidence that they can do something that's kind of bright and crowd pleasing. So I don't know. I mean, again, the movie really didn't really get on my radar except for that fact, and then the fact that Michael Keaton's Batman was supposed to pop up in it after or before or somehow tied in with his reappearance as Batman in the Flash film, which I think we should talk a little bit about that film in a second. I don't know. There's just something about this project that sounded like it was humming along, and they spent supposedly $90 to $100 million on it, and I guess I've heard that test screenings were pretty negative or something. There was some indication that would make them, at this point you're talking about, Steve, that this movie's vulnerable to that tax write-off status when this kind of merger happens, because otherwise you are publicizing, putting something out, whatever it is. I don't know that I believe the quality of this movie has that much to do with the way that it's being shelved. Maybe the new management doesn't want to release things that are of a different level than what's considered like cinematic blockbuster status.
Yeah, for sure.
I still think it's a little strange because there's already so many different DC universe things going on with the different TV shows I just mentioned and even the animated offerings they have. So yeah, I guess I don't have strong feelings about the movie itself. I do think it seems unfortunate that the representation aspect of this, the like who the lead character is and who the actor is and the creators behind it. I don't know. There's a lot about this movie that seems like it's a mystery to me what the movie would have been. But it's hard for me to believe that the quality level of this movie is so low that it deserves to be treated unlike almost any other thing you've heard of recently, where it's all but finished and they're just going to say, no, you can't see it, and it's gone. And in order for them to have that write-off, they have to sit on it. It has to be disappeared forever. So yeah, I don't know. I think my interest in the movie shot up exponentially when I thought, like, oh, so what is this movie that made them make this bizarre decision? You know, I can't believe that it's that bad, and I also can't believe that they have such a clear picture of what they want to do that this movie doesn't fit it. Yeah, it's very strange. I mean, people across the industry are very much criticizing this choice. You know, a lot of the directors and creative people I follow on Twitter are saying all that, like, this is just not the way to treat a film that people worked hard on. What do you think, Ronald?
Yeah. I mean, it breaks my heart. Like, it, you know, I've compared a lot of the DC stuff to like feeling like CW productions and stuff like that, and some of the CW DC stuff kind of being mediocre, but there are some good things that come out of it. So the idea of, you know, if you've been involved in any sort of production, and you know that there's light people and sound people and editors and things like that, the fact that these people will not have a piece of their resume that was huge. I mean, this sounded like it was groundbreaking. We have a Latina Batgirl with this cool story, and Batman coming back. The old Batman is really cool. One thing I really want to talk about is the wave of hyperbole that kind of started around the time of that stuff. If you know anything about stocks and anything like that, because I'm starting to, you know, you and I are starting to get the stocks, and you know, one thing I know about acquisition is that nothing happens at the drop of a hat. It just doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. It may feel like it, you know, this sort of highlight reel sort of thing that they do, where they're just like, this is done. That's not how acquisition works. It just isn't how it works. So I think I fed into it a little more than I should have. And I knew that some of these things weren't going to completely disappear. That's just not the way that it works. Not when a company's taken over another company. It takes maybe like close to a year before you really start to see like crazy moves being made, right? Now, one thing I will talk about that's related to all of this wave of information is two facts we know that have kind of come out, and I'm glad we're doing the podcast today. Blue Beetle is still in production, and it seems to be on the safe side. That's come out today. And that there were reshoots. This is why I'm bringing it back to you guys after I say this. Reshoots were done for The Flash, and during the WB presentation, they made it very clear that this is like the flagship movie.
Yeah.
Now we have just found out that Ezra has gotten in trouble for a burglary, and it's getting to the point now where it feels like there's a kind of exhausting their options with them. Yes. I apologize.
It's hard. Yes. Right.
Yes.
Apology
exhausting. Yeah. Exhausting the options with them. So what I'm going to ask you guys is overall. Okay. So I'll finish the whole thought with, I was very invested in the hyperbole. I knew that some things were going to remain. I'm glad that things aren't completely done yet. And two things, I guess, the idea that Discovery Plus and HBO Max, which I've heard for close to like 8 months, is going to be a thing. I mean, I heard that quite a while ago when you first got news that Discovery was coming to eat Warner Brothers up and AT&T was getting rid of them.
Yeah.
Right. What I want to ask you guys is, how do you feel?
Is it not wild to you that Discovery is larger than Warner Brothers in that situation?
Yes.
Or larger than HBO?
Okay, yes.
That's blowing my mind.
So I guess what I want to ask you guys is, how do you guys feel about the idea that these two services are definitely coming together? And B, what do you think about the idea that Ezra Miller's Flash is kind of, even in the presentation, kind of the movie that is the highlight of this new iteration of
the movie that's too big to fail, the movie that's too much of a load-bearing movie for them to shit can the way they did Batgirl.
How do you guys feel about those two ideas? Because they're kind of related. Because like they're getting rid of them. It seems like the model of like movies coming to the service is gone. That's dead.
Or at least at that scale. I think that's the differentiation, is that like he kept making comments about like, you know, movies well, so conversations around DC movies, like superhero movies, on a
Yeah.
scale that it should only be in theaters. But like,
Mhm.
whatever they're gonna do with any kind of original movie for a streaming service, that it would not be at that scale. Something
Mm.
something that's like in this weird, at least what they're claiming, this weird in between of being like a pretty high production value, low compared to some superhero movies, but high compared to other movies that are being made that are going straight to streaming services.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
at least for their experience in making these movies on their streaming service. But I mean, I think the flash of it all, I think it really just comes down to how high they are on the movie. Again, test screenings have been like through the roof for the Flash
Yeah.
movie, and it really does for all accounts really sound like it might be like the first like true home run for them
Okay.
if they can
Yeah.
get it into a theater. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I guess part of me really would be, man, a part of me would really be shocked if it didn't, only because of how much has been spent on it and who is all in it and what's been shot for it.
Right.
Mhm.
And it's a much larger budget. The cast is much larger, even outside of Ezra Miller. And even though he's the
Yeah.
star, they're the star of the film. It's there's other things that movie is, from what I've read, is doing beyond
Yeah.
just being a
Yeah.
Flash movie.
Yeah.
And I think that really a part of me feels like in their minds they have to, like, basically we've got to get to the Flash. We have to get to the point that we get that movie out. I mean,
At
because they
any
really,
cost?
that's what I'm saying. It's hard to say. Like, I feel like in a part of their mind, they're probably thinking, we've got to start getting these movies out. Whether basically Black Adam, Aquaman 2, Shazam are movies that they're pretty high on, it seems, and like
Yeah.
and again, with the information that we get online now is like crazy. The test screenings. There's these accounts on Twitter like
Yeah.
where people report in from these test screenings that I do read, and those movies seem like they're testing really well, and that's like a good sign for them. Doesn't mean the movies are good. It just means that that's just the feedback they're getting with the cut that they're showing right now.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I just feel like if they it a part of me feels like if they can get those movies out and get to the Flash, it's like that's the reset. It almost feels like he
Yeah.
kept talking about resetting and talking about a 10-year plan, bringing on Alan Horn, who used to be over at Disney and was a part of what they kind of put together with Feige, and even mentioning Kevin Feige in his presentation. They're having that comp, and they want that reset to happen, and it feels like the Flash movie is going to be that reset, or they're trying to make it that reset, at least to feel like from there we will have a plan for 10 years that will allow us to compete with Marvel more effectively, and more successfully. But it's a weird thing to feel about the Flash, because apples to apples, like, there's some pretty big problems with this movie, with the star of the film, and it just seems to
Yes.
it literally gets worse every month.
No, like legit legal issues where
No, I
every
know.
time
Yeah.
it's like a new
Yeah.
crime and a new location,
Right.
and
Yes.
it's like,
Just
wow.
all around the world, and like it's
Yeah.
just like, where have they gotten like a warrant for their arrest this week?
And also, like,
which is bad.
Ezra is someone who the appeal of them would be a quirky, fun, likable underdog kind of vibe.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that's another thing that confounds this, is that this was supposed to be like, that wasn't even supposed to be a problem with this movie. Do you know
Right,
what I mean?
right. No, absolutely. Like, what a good, it's like a good pairing, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
at least it seems like it on the surface, but it's just kind of compounded so much that I feel really weird saying it, but it's just like, part of me feels like, how do you put this movie out when this is the star of the movie, and how do you promote a movie and press for a movie and have people talk about the star of the movie and the movie when it's becoming this problematic, when you have things to compare it to, like a movie that you're shelving for eternity, basically,
Yeah.
where there's really nothing wrong with that movie.
Where the only crime was that it may have been
Right.
like mid or
It
something.
may have been, exactly.
Yeah. But I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, like, how many women do they have to attack? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's happened like 2 or 3 times at this point.
Right.
I'm like, is that not enough? The burglary isn't enough. Like,
Yeah.
I can't figure out what is the line. And
A cult in Iceland? Did I read that one right?
Are you serious?
Some,
Yeah, that's
some,
one of the
some
things.
cult leader status of some
He's got
group, but maybe
he's got like or they've got allegedly have a cult that they may have started in Iceland.
Okay. Huh.
I mean,
What?
I don't
so.
know.
Exactly which universe are we in? Maybe this is the universe where the Flash is a weird asshole who has all these crimes. But yeah, no,
Good
it's an unusual
God.
thing. But I kind of agree with you, Steve, that like they are just holding their nose and trying to get to the finish line. It's
Yes,
almost like they're
yes.
going for the forgiveness over permission with having
Yeah,
Ezra be in this
yeah,
movie.
I think so.
That at the end they can say, well, we won't make that mistake again, but look at the movie and look at what we set up and look who all's in it, and there's no way we
Right.
can digitally remove that face and put Grant Gustin's face in this movie, so we're just going to go with what we've got, or whatever they
No,
would do.
Totally.
And it's like whatever choice they wish they could go back to change how they made this movie, they would have to go back so far, to be like
Crazy.
like let's fix the timeline and not hire Ezra Miller. And it's crazy to think of like how that did not seem like a dangerous choice to make. And I guess it never is when you don't know that an actor is, toxic in that way. But anyway,
yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, I mean, it'll be an interesting thing because like even like you mentioned, Ronald, like the more, we're talking like literally 4 or 5 days go by and like, you're getting more information about, like you said, the Blue Beetle and, the Black Canary spinoff they mentioned is
Yeah, they
still
said
in
that's still
production.
going, yeah.
And some of these
Yeah.
movies are getting like promoted, meaning, they're basically taking them from the streaming service and they're going to be theatrical. Like that's what they're talking about with Blue Beetle. So there's factors in play somewhere where whether it's quality or scope or stakes, that was a big thing that kept coming out about the Blue Beetle stuff. I mean, about the Batgirl stuff, was that like the movie felt really small in terms of stakes and villains and things like that. And I'm sure there'll be even more information that come out, between now and we record another podcast. I mean, it just seems like there's so much in flux right now. It's so fluid
Yeah.
that they've got a pretty big undertaking, in this merger of kind of clearing off a ton of debt that Warner Media had or has. And, this is a way that they're trying to approach doing that. Like I said at the top, like there's already been a ton of shows, and other DC properties like the Supergirl thing and the Wonder Twins, like that all got just stopped before it even got started, So like they've really kind of, there's consistency there in some way, but it makes you wonder, like the ones that are kind of okay, I guess they're at a different level, or again, the scope or the stakes, something is there that they see value in still kind of trying to push this to a theatrical experience, which is really what they're kind of pivoting towards. Which personally, real quick, like you talk about the stock stuff, Ronald, like, obviously they took a big hit last week. The stock did when they had that earnings call, but it's crazy to me to think that like 2 years ago, the former CEO, Jason Kilar, like he was all in on streaming, like everything was streaming, like Project Popcorn comes out and like completely blows up the theatrical exhibition industry about all the movies going to HBO and everybody's up in arms. And like, you couldn't think of more of a 180 to be like, okay, well, we're canceling movies that were going to be for the service. We're only doing theatrical. Like they literally feel like they're in ways trying to kill the streaming service by saying these movies that would cause people to sign up for a DC experience that's only available here are not going to happen anymore. We're not going to have family programming. We're not going to have, a lot of scripted series that were in production for HBO Max. Like HBO's fine. It's just crazy to me to think about what a pivot has happened in less than 2 years. And the irony, I think, is that the real what is it? I guess the irony, whatever. I'm missing a word, but the take is that HBO Max is one of the best streaming services around.
Legitimately.
And they literally just want to, like, it feels like they really don't care anymore about having HBO Max.
And did they not know that audiences feel that way? I mean, did they not like even down to the interface? This is one of the apps that people say, "Oh, I actually like HBO Max," but they also do have a lot. Like right now, under their umbrella, there's a lot of stuff, and maybe that's changing by the minute. But like what you said about the different shows, that some HBO stuff, like if it says HBO, it's safe. If it's HBO Max, it might not be safe.
Right.
I think most of the shows that we talk about on this show, like Hacks and Peacemaker and Our Flag Means Death and stuff, I feel like that stuff is probably safe, but it's ambiguous. Like Our Flag Means Death barely got a second season announcement before before this announcement came out. So, I
Right,
mean, I think
true.
that like the Discovery people, when they talk about this, they say, no, we intend to do a lot of great scripted stuff with HBO. But right now, I mean, like that doesn't change the fact that supposedly there's talk of cutting like 70% of the people working on the scripted side
Yeah.
of development.
Right.
So maybe they have their own way of, they're going to redevelop things or they're going to bring things. But it's like, it feels like a strange paradigm shift, even if, as you've said, by the time this episode comes out, we could already have some information that makes some of this stuff seem less crazy. I do
Yeah.
think most people that are listening should know, most like the shows that are getting award nominations and the critical acclaim and that everyone's raving about, those shows are probably safe. The ones you need to worry about are those little odd shows that you may have liked on this service that you're like, oh, this is a cool thing. Like that stuff is probably on the bubble. And as you said, Steve, there's a lot of programming they've just shut down that they're not going to do. So it's crazy.
I listen to John Campia's podcast, and he has some like friends that work in the inside, and he was basically saying that the overlapping, the reason why the people are being laid off is the overlapping. They think that there's some redundancy in HBO Max and HBO proper writers. It just doesn't make any sense to have two sets, so they're going to consolidate them into one group writing for both, versus there being allocation for money for HBO Max writers versus they're two buildings that aren't near each other, apparently.
Yeah, sure.
And they're trying to put them all in one building, have them all making one group of content, which makes sense a little more. Like, I mean, obviously it's terrible that people are getting fired. I mean, that's awful, but the idea of redundancy should make more sense if you think about the fact that two services are existing under the same umbrella, but not under the same roof.
And if, as Steve said, they're trying to wipe away as much debt as possible in this acquisition. So, I mean, that's still, you're right. It's still scary when you hear about that many
super
people losing
scary,
jobs,
man.
but
I don't want anybody to lose a job. I mean, like, you know, as much as I want there to be some consolidation, maybe if it saves them some money or whatever, because I don't want anybody to get fired, but that just comes with the territory of acquisition, man. It just is. It's a brutal thing. I worked at XM when Sirius bought them, and it was the same thing. Like you go to a meeting where everybody's like, "Hey, we love you guys. You're the greatest guys ever," and then you get fired a week later. It's just the way that it works. That is business. So.
But let me ask you this real quick. So everything you said,
Sure.
that's true. Obviously, like that all makes sense.
Yeah.
Name 3 Discovery scripted series.
90 Day Fiance. They have that spinoff show.
is that scripted?
Scripted.
Scripted, yeah.
There aren't any. Oh, do you count those murder shows? Aaron watches all those.
I don't think those count as scripted, but
okay,
technically
so
they are probably.
So John and Steven, those don't count as scripted. There's no script. I don't know any scripted.
I only say that because like what you said is true. Like there's 2 camps, there's 2 facilities, there's tons of writers. They've got, you know, they're gonna consolidate, they're gonna cut. But I just think that really feels like the way they talked about it in their earnings call, and like even some of the reporting that came out in the days prior, like the idea of possibly cutting 70% of the scripted staff from HBO Max, when you're saying you have all this staff at Discovery, I just feel like what is one known for versus the other, and why cut the staff from the place that has primarily scripted versus reality? Like, I think that's what everybody's like reaction to it is that it seems like the flip of what it should be.
Right.
And it's almost like they're doing that because, again, probably cost savings, you know, redundancy, like probably maybe things went a little wild at HBO Max or Warner Media while Jason Kilar was there, which apparently it did. And that's why they're in so much debt. But I just like, you know, just the logic of it is so weird to me, to like when I think of Discovery, which some people don't even realize Discovery has a streaming platform.
A lot of people don't know.
It's just like, oh, you think of like a lot of reality, you know, lifestyle stuff. Like that's really what you think, or I think of, and it seems like the programming looks like. So, I don't know. We'll see how it shakes out, but it's just a weird situation, and it's definitely something. This is like the, you know, phase 2 or 3 of the streaming wars. You know, if you think about it, because
nuts,
it's
man.
like this is the switch. Is that like things changed a little bit. Netflix got shook up. I think the streaming platforms got a little scared. And now they're like,
Yeah.
okay, well, we're not going to spend $90 million on a movie that people will probably talk about for 2 days.
Yeah.
And we'll see what that looks like, I guess.
And if they then said this isn't good enough to put out in theaters and spend another
Right.
90 million to 100 million on marketing, or if not more than that, at base level to get a return on it. So yeah, no, it's I mean, I think we're all very pro the art side of it, if you can call a Batgirl movie art. I don't know, but like,
sure it is.
We're I mean, you know what I'm saying though. I'm not calling it high art, but we're pro the creative side of it. So it's like definitely the movie is, we're on the side of the movie. But I think some of these business forces that we're talking about, it's interesting to try to understand what would lead to what sounds like a losing position to shelve a movie that costs that much. But if it's worth more as a tax write-off than it is to spend the marketing budget they would need to do this, especially if, as you said, Steve, it's ultimately going to be a blip on the radar of the conversation out there. And I guess that's where you can't agree or disagree because you don't know, with the decision that this movie wouldn't have galvanized fans or whatever. I mean, I feel like that's where it seems like maybe they're being a little cautious that it's possible this movie could have had a passionate audience that would have made it, worth it for the service in terms of clicks and all that kind of stuff. But it's always vague how that stuff works anyway, how many plays or how many downloads or whatever they call it, like. And would a movie like this eventually then go to a streaming, like for sale on other services? It seems like they just had no faith in it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So do you think we'll ever, I mean, I guess you won't see it, but it's crazy to think that a movie that someone, won't Robin Hood that fucker out into the cosmos somewhere.
That's what you hope for, I guess. I don't want to say that on a podcast, but you almost root that like somebody's like, I've been seeing those, it's going around just like the meme of Mike from Breaking Bad or from Better Call Saul.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna go into the Warner Discovery office.
This is what you're gonna do
with a flash drive.
You're gonna
32
go into
gigabytes.
Warner Brothers.
No more, no less. It's just like, I'm like, that's kind of what I need. That's what we're gonna need to probably get the Batgirl out there.
Yep.
Is some very clear directions and a very focused operative. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see, man. I mean, obviously things are still shaking out, and I'm sure that won't be the first or the last. I mean, I'm sorry, it won't be the last kind of weird thing to happen with whatever they're trying to do over there. And obviously we'll keep tracking what's going on with the Flash movie. But let's move on a little bit. And Ronald, let's get into your required viewing. You want to talk to us a little bit about Raging Fire?
Yeah, so Raging Fire is a film that is considered an American 2012 release. 2020. 2000 no. That's even, it's an American 2022 release. It came out overseas 2021, but it came out in theaters this year. Is Benny Chan's Raging Fire, starring Donnie Yen. It is a story about corruption, betrayal, and a whole lot of shooting. And
yeah,
the opposite of those British, like the last one you brought us to, Ronald, was The Responder, and we talked about how in that, like, there's not a lot of gunplay because it's England, and if someone has a gun in that, it's like, what big fucking deal, they've got a gun. Guns are just like flying around, and people are just and I mean, I do think that's part of the style of like a Korean cop thriller, but it's like this movie ticks all the boxes of like the Korean cop thriller, right down to like the former rookie cop who's the bad guy. I mean, I don't know, it definitely hits all the protege is the villain kind of stuff. But no, it's gunplay aplenty in Raging Fire.
And I just, I want to get you guys kind of onto the non-American Donnie Yen stuff, just to get in a headspace for the new John Wick. He showed up mysteriously in the new trailer, and he's doing a lot of gun fu, and I cannot fucking wait for that. But in preparation, I want you to watch Raging Fire. So what did you guys think of this movie?
Ronald, I want to throw something at you before we get into our feelings. Like Benny Chan, the director, this is his last movie that he worked on or that he finished. I was looking into it, and I realized, I know some of his work, but I didn't know if Benny Chan is a figure that you would maybe want to speak about a little bit as far as his style and just like what he represented. Because I mean, clearly this was considered to be, you know, in that genre I just mentioned, he was considered to be a pretty big name. So
Yeah, man. When I think about Benny Chan, I think about like New Police Story with Jackie Chan and stuff like that. There's a very specific he goes for like imagine like Michael Mann sort of realism, like sort of grittiness with a lot of well shot action. His legacy is incredible. You should kind of look up New Police Story is one of my favorites, but his work goes all the way back to like the 90s. Um just real distinct, beautiful style. And it, you know, it's one of those things where you're in a room and you're like, what does this room contain that could kill me? And then they'll show like a hatchet in the corner, and then it just he's very good at spatial awareness. There's a scene in Raging Fire that I think about almost weekly. The scene where he has to get the guy out of the bad neighborhood, and he gets attacked by like what I could count to be 150 people trying to kill him at once. It's fucking crazy. Though, you know, he creates these high stakes sort of experiences that, you know, it's visceral, man. You feel it all, and you see it on the screen. And Donnie Yen really, and I think Jackie Chan and Donnie Yen are his muses, honestly. They weren't in every movie that he's done, but Donnie Yen's in a ton of them. And I think that Donnie Yen became his like, I have to make an amazing adult thriller with him. And that also shows his acting chops. So I'm a big fan of Donnie and Benny Chan. So yeah. What you guys think?
I mean, I gotta say, like, this is definitely a blind spot for me, like in terms of like what I watch with any regularity. Like, there are a handful of, you know, these action films imports, like these foreign films that you kind of hear about, like when it kind of gets past a certain point, and like I feel like breaks into, you know, whether it's film Twitter or, you know, in the last maybe 5-10 years, film Twitter, or even before then, like, you know, some of the online boards I used to go on. But like, so like, had you not mentioned this movie, I don't know that I ever would have even heard of it, to be blunt. And I feel like, you know, definitely aware of who Donnie Yen is, and really just kind of his reputation, and in more recent years, like kind of what he's done in Hollywood. But I mean, my first feeling watching this was that like this felt like an action movie from like the 90s. Like it felt like, just like in terms of the action and the gunplay, and like, you know, they're the good cop versus the bad cop, or the cop that never was, kind of thing. Like that kind of storyline. Even down to like the epic fight in a church, you know, like these little things that feel like you feel like you've seen them before in this kind of genre film. But like the cool thing was like they're being done in ways that you really maybe have seen before, but like from a different perspective or different approaches to action. And I think obviously the stunts in this movie are really incredible, and like, you know, the stunt work and the choreography is just really impressive. And it just is one of those things where like when you watch one because it's recommended by someone whose opinion you value, you're like, man, like I gotta watch more of these.
Yeah.
Or I gotta seek out more of these, or use that wealth of knowledge that you have, because I know you watch a lot of them. It's like, what are the 5 best that you would tell me to watch? Because like this one I thought was really entertaining. I thought was really, I enjoyed watching this. But it's like there's got to be ones that are just like knockouts, like, you know, just like all timers that I just know I've never seen, and maybe I've never even heard of. And I walk away from watching this like this is a really recent movie, and I'm just like, I haven't even heard of it. Like I'd be and I read and hear about so much. And that's like definitely a blind spot for me, and it bums me out a little bit, because this was like fun to watch, and especially looking for like a fun action kind of thriller. And again, like John said, like I'm always down for like a good cop thriller. Like I just like that feeling. And even your comment about some of the Michael Mann comparison that you just said, like that stands out too, even, you know, to me. Like I kind of thought the same thing in a couple sequences.
Well, the crews, the different crews made me think about Michael Mann. The way that Bong, who's our hero, had a crew that we don't really get to know, but we see them in enough scenes that we start to kind of know who they are and know that they're solid and kind of care about them. And the same thing happens with I'm gonna try to find his name because I don't want to always Ngo or Nyo.
Yeah.
But Nicholas Say plays him, and Donnie Yen is Bong. Yeah, I think that like the archetypes and the kind of like, I mean, you'd watch this movie in any language, any country, and it would have similar like those genre requirements that it has to have. I do think there's a thing about Korean, like I said, specifically cop thrillers, that in their culture, it's a little bit less. And maybe this movie is, I don't know if it's considered fashionable or old fashioned in the way that it's definitely kind of a, we've talked about this with The Responder. Like, you don't see a lot of like cop worship, cop genre stuff anymore. Most stuff now, it's got like some inherent criticism of cops. I think that Raging Fire sort of has that. There are corrupt cops, but more so the idea of like the valiant cop. It is treated very seriously as a heroic character, so much so that Donnie Yen, we accept that he's against the brutal cops who are corrupt, even though sometimes what he does to somebody he's trying to catch or somebody he's trying to stop is incredibly brutal. It's like the idea that it's kind of like that whole thing of Batman doesn't kill anybody, and you watch a Batman movie and you're like, really? Like, yeah, he really tries not to kill anybody. And you're like, are we sure we're talking about the same Batman? Batman, the guy that just did all that. I feel like the idea that he's a good cop is really only in comparison to the guys who are like doing, really shady shit. But it's an action hero movie. And so you're really looking at it for those fight choreography scenes. And what you said, Steve, that final fight in the church, it's got all of the marks of like, the classic final battle, but the actors are doing some pretty amazing stuff with their bodies and with the timing of everything, and it does go on a little extra long, which is another kind of trait of these types of movies. When they get to like one of those action sequences, there's sort of an over-the-top quality to it. And if it looks like a comic book sometimes. Like you'll pull out and you'll see something that it's like, this looks like a drawing from a comic that you would have to work so hard to orchestrate it so that all the details you need to see are well lit and in focus. And there's 50 guys coming down this hallway, and there's 20 guys down here, and Donnie Yen is lit so that we can see where he is and we can see him as distinct from the others. There's such an art to that stuff. That I kind of felt exactly the same way you said, Steve, of like, oh, this is really fun. I'm enjoying this. And now I really want to know, like, because I've seen a few of them probably. I don't always remember the names of movies I've watched years ago, like Sunken into Someone's Couch. But, watching those Korean cop thrillers, there are some that have like, they're a little bit more grounded than this or a little bit more kind of refined than this. I feel like what you get from this is the production value of Donnie Yen being a huge, huge star, and Benny Chan obviously being like a huge director. So you are seeing like a lot of production value in this thing. But I began to think, it would be fun to try to like watch the cream of the crop, like the ones that people would say, if this one's a little formulaic, what are the ones that define the genre? And I kind of wanted to also maybe tag onto that a question to both of you about Donnie Yen's like on-screen persona. I kept thinking in this movie, it was kind of almost on an amusing level. He's got real like disappointed dad or like even more so like angry high school principal energy or something. Like the way that he responds to things is definitely like, he's exasperated, and he's a little bit almost whiny, in his like attitude. Like when he's fighting with the bad guy's got all this seething control, and when they talk, and Donnie Yen's got this kind of like, come on, what are you talking about? Like, just get with it, But I don't know. What do you guys think of Donnie Yen's like, on-screen persona, and the way that he does have something a little bit different? He doesn't quite look like he's going to be the ass kicker. I think that might be something that works for him. Not even his face. Somehow, even his expressions, he just doesn't look like he's that guy. So when he does all this amazing stuff physically, I do think there's some kind of like, not quite a comedic element, but there's like a surprise element, even if you've seen him do it before, to the fact that he's this very normal looking guy, and yet he can do all that.
I think that's it. Like I feel exactly with what you just said. Like I think it's like, it kind of disarms you a little bit, in terms of expectations, especially if you're not like, I mean, obviously he's an international star, and like if you don't know, if you go into a movie without that expectation or without understanding, and you see like his persona, like the way he carries himself, or even the way he his face physically looks. It doesn't like scream like, I'm the action guy. Until you start seeing him move, and then you're like, oh well, I was wrong about that.
He is.
Wait a second.
I hope he's never mad at me.
There's a scene that kind of sums up how he is in most of his movies. He goes the catalyst for all this craziness to kind of kick itself off is the son of a of a group commits a crime, and they bring him into the room and it's like, hey, this guy committed a crime.
Yeah.
Can you forgive him? You're a cop. And he's drinking some tea from this group of very rich people. It's very expensive tea. He takes 2 sips and he's like, I took 2 sips. So here's the money for what I drank. I don't want anything to do with this. That's him. That's his character. It's like this, kind of like Captain America. I think that's why I like Captain America so much. There's like in the middle, his struggle is just trying to be a good person in the middle of very shitty people. It doesn't mean that like every move will be the best move. It just means that he'll try to do the best that he can in each situation.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of that kind of morality. You know, it's a cool way to look at the world. And I was a big fan of Jackie Chan stuff that kind of has the same sort of idea. I think they have the same blueprint, him and Jackie Chan. It's like I want to be the sinner that has this moral compass that can't be broken. You know, so that's kind of the driving force of all of his movies. Including one of my favorites, IP Man. That's the guy that trained Bruce Lee. That quadrilogy or whatever is flawless in my eyes. If you want to start on something Donnie Yen related and don't necessarily want to get into the cop thing, that's an amazing series.
I've seen, I think, the first IP Man, but I can't be sure that it's not maybe one of them, just one of them. But yes, but yeah, it's a different vibe, but it's a similar. You're right that there's a similar kind of just a straight-laced sort of hero, and it's like an unironic presentation, maybe when you mention Captain America, of that kind of person who's going to do the right thing, who almost has a stick up their ass about things, you know, like that scene that you're talking about at the very close to the beginning of the film where he pisses off all the corrupt cops and the whole organization behind him and shows him he's not going to even bend a little. Like, you watch a scene like that and you're like, there may have even been a way to handle that didn't ruffle so many feathers, but he's just got no wiggle room in his own mind. What I liked was how like sketched in his home life was. It's like, oh, don't worry, folks, he's got a pregnant wife. You're only going to see her just long enough to recognize that that's what's going on, though. I guess she comes into play in the movie. There's the threat. You know, they do that whole, she's, you know, your wife's in danger kind of scene. And that scene is pretty crazy. Talk about an over-the-top scene. Actually, that moment was like trying to figure out the different ways it could go wrong and how it could possibly go right. I was going, you know, it was pretty wild the way that plays out. Anytime you have a bomb attached to somebody, that's always like, that's another standby in this type of movie. But you always feel sorry for the poor guy with the bomb stuck on him.
Craziness. But yeah, man, I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. I can definitely suggest some movies. But yeah, I give IP Man a go. There's a big one that he has on Netflix that's really good. Just look up Donnie Yen, and I think it's a Netflix original movie or something like that. It's like one of those, another cop movie where he's incredible, kicking people in the chest. A lot of chest kicks too. A lot of chest kicks.
A lot of switching weapons around in mid-fight too. That's another cool thing, is the way people's weapons get taken from them and used against them very, very quickly.
Very quickly.
If you see a henchman come in and he's got an interesting weapon that's like a hook or something, you're like, oh, that guy, you know what, guy? That hook's about to get used on you. Donnie Yen's not going to stand for that.
Last thing I'll ask you guys about, what do you think about the montage of him running that happens like the whole movie of him running towards the scene in the rain, but it's like this exaggerated.
Yeah. Sometimes you do something that just so it'll make a nice silhouette. You know, that's what it feels like. Like you got to have a nice side view of the.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys liked it.
Well, all right, Raging Fire. So, Steve, what's our next required viewing?
So, I before we were recording, I was like, I'm going down the list of IMDb's top 250, and I was like, I'm going to pick something I haven't seen on there. And I don't know why this just popped in my mind, but I didn't do that at all. I was planning to pick a movie I haven't seen. And then I got sidetracked. I saw a little news article pop up here while we were starting to record, and it was talking about a TNT show in its sixth and final season called Animal Kingdom. And it reminded me of the movie that it's based on, 2010's Animal Kingdom, written and directed by David Michaud and starring three of my favorite Australians or New Zealanders. I don't know exactly where they're from, but they're from that area of the
Let me
world.
guess.
But
Jocko, Crocodile Dundee, and the guy from Men at Work.
yeah, amazingly, they're all in this movie.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, you got Ben Mendelsohn.
Yes.
Okay. You got Guy Pearce.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then you got Joel Edgerton. But if you've watched the show,
Oh.
if you know about the show, it's basically just like a crime family drama thriller. And I love the movie. I haven't seen it in years, but it made me kind of want to go back and watch it when I was reminded that the show, which I've watched the show too, and I enjoy the show, but it's in its final season. So I was thinking, I don't know if you guys have seen Animal Kingdom or not, the
No,
movie.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's kind of a movie that kind of sort of launched Ben Mendelsohn's Hollywood career. Most people
Yeah.
don't know who he is prior to that movie. And kind of in that movie, if you've watched the show, Ronald, he kind of plays the Pope character in the
Okay.
movie. So if you imagine that kind of role with Ben Mendelsohn in it, it's just he's incredible. But yeah, just I love the actors in it. The whole cast is great. Jackie Weaver's in it as the mother, and yeah, just and also one of the first ones that David Michaud kind of came out with here stateside. That was a kind of a big movie before he started doing, like stuff for Netflix or before he did The Rover or anything like that. But yeah, so I kind of want to watch Animal Kingdom again. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that and hopefully put that on some other people's radar. And we'll talk about that next week for the required viewing portion of the show.
Sweet.
Cool. That's exciting.
So let's kind of wrap this up or kind of get towards the feature review here. I mentioned it earlier last Friday. The Predator prequel came out. It's called Prey. It's on Hulu or internationally on different territories. It's on Disney Plus, outside of the States at least. But this is Dan Trachtenberg's new film. What'd you guys think of Prey? Wow, really? That's interesting.
Fucking love this movie.
And Ronald, just maybe also add in like rank, throw it in with all the other Predator movies. Like, what do you think of the Predator series? How does this stand out to you as a Predator movie or just as kind of a movie on its own?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. So I haven't seen the Predator movies in quite some time, but I do distinctly remember the feeling that I felt when I saw the first Predator. It was action-packed, it was scary, the stakes were high, and the brains were everywhere. And it's just something about the how menacing it was. It was so unique, like the camo that this Predator had was unreal. So the one I hold true in my brain is the first. I don't have much memory of the second. And then I watched the Shane Black one in 20 what year was it? 2018. Didn't love it. But it doesn't mean that
Wasn't
I wouldn't
there a
go
Robert
back.
Rodriguez one too, or did I imagine that?
No, there is a Robert Rodriguez. Yeah, that was
When was that one?
Wait, did he direct it? Hold on a second. I don't know if he directed it. Now I'm second guessing myself.
Yeah, but he was associated with it at some point, I guess. Maybe.
Which one was that? Was that Predators?
There was Predators, and then there was the new one just called Predator again?
The Predator.
The Predator. Boy,
that was the Shane Black.
Shane Black was the Predator. So the Predators is the one that had Adrian Brody and
yes,
may have been associated with Robert Rodriguez in some way, but maybe not. Maybe he was off the project by the time it got made.
I don't know. Actually, that's funny you say that because he definitely was involved with something at some point. But the Predators is coming up as what's his name? Nimrod Antal.
Oh yeah. I knew it was a name I'd heard of, but I guess I thought that it was maybe.
But maybe Rodriguez produced that. I mean, because he's a Robert Rodriguez, like he's worked with him a lot. So yeah, he did. He was a producer on Predators, so that's what it was.
Okay. I also saw that one. It was okay. I
would say those are the three good ones, actually, in my opinion. I would say Predator, Prey, and Predators are like the three good ones of the whole thing for me. Of all, I guess 7 of them, those kind of are the ones that I think are at least good or or maybe very good. I like Predators quite a bit.
I guess if we're counting Alien versus Predator and
Right.
that too,
Oh,
which
right.
I don't really count those in either series necessarily. However, I do think some part of me thinks of those movies as closer to Predator movies than they are Alien movies, just because of the kind of style of them. But I actually think that, like you said, Ronald, the first Predator has a real fun kind of twist on a men on a mission kind of movie, and it's like it's its own kind of action comedy, not a comedy, but the way all action movies had, one-liners and stuff in it. It's its own kind of action movie that then turns into like a quasi horror kind of movie, and then it's about this test of wills between Arnie and the creature. And yeah, I think Predator is a very full of memorable moments, and like you said, just the violence and the creative kills and the view of this creature that's doing something that we'd never really seen before. This idea that it's kind of like you can see its transparent shadow, sort of, so to speak, moving around. And I don't know, everything about it is like it's memorable, and it's iconic, and it's the reason for all these other movies. I was thinking recently about maybe watching Predator 2 again, just to see if I've maybe warmed up to it, because I've seen a lot of people saying it's not so bad in light of people raving about Prey, But I think Prey, to get back to the movie we're talking about here, I do think that Prey is, like you said, Ronald, it's very, like, there's something really confident about this movie. It's really solid. The idea is so fucking strong. It makes you wonder why they don't do this with more. I mean, like any franchise you don't have to travel through time, because not every franchise could be done that way. But just give us a different setting. Do give us a different era if you can do it. I do think this being like set in, 1780 or something like that, and giving us First Nations characters, if I'm using the right term there, as the heroes of the story, and like showing like the representation piece of that, and the way that the movie, I think the creators have, tried to be as inclusive in terms of just how this movie's being presented. I know that there's a Comanche dub that you can watch on Netflix.
I just watched that version.
Well, I put it back on with that. I didn't finish it, but I had it on with a little bit.
On Hulu. On Hulu.
Oh, is it on? I'm sorry, on Hulu. No, I'm in a different country where it's on Netflix. No, but the fact that this is also like available to watch on Hulu, I mean, that's another thing that's pretty amazing. I think this movie got a lot of attention in the last week. It is a huge effort, I think, to make a kind of a special movie, and I think that just the fact that we do have that the heroes are who they are, and particularly that the hero is who she is. I think, is it Naru? Is that her name?
Yep.
The character's name?
Yeah.
It makes what could be a more conventional story feel very fresh based on who it's about and the cultures that it's presenting, and the way that it's presenting, like this, not just the set in the past of our, of existence, of human existence, but the fact that the Predator 2 feels like a more primitive version of what comes along later. Like, you could believe it's 250 years or 200 years difference for this creature, the technology, the way it's being used. So the Predator culture, there's hints of that developing as this movie goes on too, and just the creative use of its invisibility. There's a scene where it kills a bear and raises it above its head, and just what happens there. There's just some cool stuff going on that I started playing it, and Nikki didn't know that it was a Predator movie. And I normally don't do this. When she was like, "What is this?" I was like, "Just watch." Normally I'll explain, but I was like, no, it'd be kind of fun to have someone realize what they're watching and realize this is a Predator movie, because it doesn't scream it from the first minute. But once it started up, Nikki, it was so funny how she was almost in this weird kind of denial. She was like, that looks like the Predator. Is this the Predator? Is this like, this is kind of like a Predator movie? And I finally was like, yes, it's a Predator movie. I'm sorry I didn't tell you at the beginning. But like, just the fact that it does feel so, it is both so totally in the formula of maybe even the first Predator movie. And yet it also feels like such a reinvention of it in so many ways. Yeah. And I will say this too. I liked the way it was shot. I thought this was a pretty movie. The scenery, the forest, the lead performance. There's a lot to like or love about this movie. And if you're a dog lover and you want to see the dog, make it through as much of the movie as you would hope a dog makes it through, I'll just go ahead and tell you, watch this movie. Other animals don't do so well, but the dog comes out pretty okay. No, it just felt fresh. I mean, it feels odd to say that about a movie that really kind of fits the cookie cutter template of Predator comes to Earth, picks off people, somebody beats it. But I thought it was well staged, and somehow it's small despite feeling like the scope of it's kind of big, but it's a small sort of story as far as just what happens in the movie. There's no earth-threatening stakes. It's just, can you survive this monster?
Yeah.
And Naru's
Steve,
a
what'd
very
you think?
clever person.
Very clever.
I loved it, man. I'll be
Me
honest
too,
with
man.
you. Like, I've been raving about this movie. Definitely one of my favorite movies I've seen this year. I think it's one of the things that, like, kind of like John was saying, it's just kind of like, it feels like it's a back to basics approach to what a Predator movie should or could
Yeah.
be. And the idea of, like, just, it's so simple, just like, it's just in nature, it's like, it's just the idea of these forces, battling in nature. And I really, really think the movie's one of the strongest things about it is just simply the idea, following Naru's character, like, through her tribe, in terms of, like, her this underdog feeling, about not capable of doing things that she knows that she can do, because of, the expectations of her tribe, or whatever. And even, like, the relationship that she has with her brother. And I'd love the way that it approaches that, even in terms of, like, how the Predator sees her, and the idea of, like, not a threat, and without the realization of how threatening she really is, because she's so fucking smart and intelligent and
Yeah.
just resourceful. And I think the way that ramps up in the last, like, 40 minutes of the movie, because I feel like it really does kick in, at a certain point. um and kind of incorporates a lot of the hunting that tribe does. And, like, even when there's a couple interactions with some of the other warriors from the tribe, like the kind of blows that they get on the Predator
Yeah.
that are successful. And you kind of start to see the little, like, kinks in the armor. And
It's a slow learning process. Yeah.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then she's watching that too, like, she benefits from the idea of, I'm not a threat, so I'm seeing, like, what works and doesn't. And, like, you can kind of see her working through all that in the last 20 minutes or so of the movie. But I thought she was incredible. I mean, hopefully this movie does a lot for her career, because I thought she was just awesome on the screen, just as a action star. Like, she was great. And I also just wanted to say, I really kind of like the look of this Predator a lot. The idea of it being, hundreds of years before the original Predator movie. It's like, the idea that these creatures, these monsters, would have looked a little different. They're a little leaner, like, it looks more, a little more mobile, a little more, you can see a little more emotion in it, even, like, little frustration almost at times.
Yeah.
When those tides start to change. And
Like
I
a
thought that was
bone
really
helmet
cool.
too, or a skull helmet rather than
Right. Yeah. I thought that was
Yeah.
cool. Like, that's a little more sensitive to certain weapons, certain battle things. I don't know. I loved it. I thought it was great. And
Yeah.
I'm happy to see it. They said this week that it's, like, the highest premiere for any Hulu original, whether it's TV or movies. And that's awesome. And it did really well across every territory, I think, and did for all Disney Plus and Star Plus, which is where it premiered internationally. It was, like, the highest watched thing there as well, which is just cool. And hopefully it does a lot for Dan Trachtenberg. I really like him as a director. I like his eye for. I like the idea of shooting on location. It looks like they shot a lot of this on location, and from what I've heard of him on a few podcasts, that they did do that. And
well, that might be why it looks so pretty.
it looks
right there.
it looks
just that
great.
it's actually shot in the real, beautiful wilderness or untouched.
It's gorgeous.
wilderness.
Yeah, it looks great on the screen.
I just watched The Neverending Story not too long ago. So I just saw the sinking scene.
Oh yeah,
That was almost shot identical to he has to have thought
sure
about that.
Oh, he's like super pop culture. Like,
okay.
he's like, he had some sort of career initially in, like, YouTube, pop culture gaming stuff. Like, you look into him. Like, when he did 10 Cloverfield Lane, he used to have a YouTube series podcast that I used to listen to, that he was, like, a host of years and years ago. And then he pivoted and was doing, like, game commercials, and he was doing a lot of, like, music videos and things like that. And then 10 Cloverfield was, like, his big break. But he's, like, super on his sleeve about, like, 80s 90s pop culture shit. So I think that connection you're mentioning is probably a direct connect to something like The Neverending Story.
It was a white kid in Native American garb doing it in the previous version. Right. How cool was it that there was a Native person actually doing it? And how crazy is it that the stinger at the end of the movie was done as uniquely as it was? Like
Yeah.
that blew my mind. Like I it's just every piece of this movie has a lot of love in it. And I just you feel it, and I've kind of said this before. I don't know how Hulu does it, but I've never seen, like, Hulu is a standard of quality in terms of the way their shows look, the way their movies look.
Yeah.
And this is just an example of, just the quality that comes with their stuff. I can't wait to talk about one of the future Hulu projects that's coming out, but this is flawless, and I cannot wait to see what he has coming up. But this is
Yeah. I want to mention also, John, you talked about Nikki.
Sure.
I can say the same, is that like I kind of dragged Aaron. I like not the same, but similar, like where she had like really is like, oh, this looks cool. Like, what is this? She doesn't have any connection to Predator or anything, but it was the kind of experience where it was like I could sense her getting into the movie, as it kind of trucked along, and like she really, really liked it.
Yeah.
So it's like, is that kind of cool, like discovery, I guess, of like no idea what this movie is, no interest in you watching this. Why do you have to watch
Wow.
this right now? Hold on a second. Like, what just happened? Like,
Yeah, what's
oh
going
shit,
on?
that's cool. Whoa, she just
Right.
tied like a string to her like hatchet so she could pull it back and like be super cool with it. Oh, okay. I could like feel
Yeah.
her getting into it, which
Yeah.
is really fun.
Well, we should mention her by name. Amber Midthunder, I believe, is her name.
Midthunder.
And she was
Star.
great on what was
Legion.
the show? Legion. Yeah,
Yeah.
she was on that show. Very memorable on that show. But this is even more of a character, and she gets to play. I mean, I know like the style of this movie is very interesting. There's a very contemporary sort of English style to the dialogue that I think makes it maybe more immediately engaging to a modern audience. But the fact that you can watch it dubbed in Comanche with subtitles is it's a great way to keep that language alive. There are segments of the movie where they're speaking Comanche. But I think that this is just, this should be the beginning. This should be one of 100 movies we can think of that approach this culture in this way, and that it's not as a shame. But I do think, it feels like a real victory for representation. And I've seen a few people sort of posting about it in that very sincere way, saying this is a really badass character. And a really cool way to have this character emerge. So much so that you think, okay, where do you go next? Do you do Prey 2? Do you know what I mean? Like, is the next movie almost as much of a Naru story as it is a Predator story? That's where I would be thinking some kind of rematch with this character. But if this is a one and done kind of thing, I sure hope this isn't the last time someone looks at this milieu and says this is a great backdrop for all kind of genre stories. Any kind of fantasy thing, and the way that like the French trappers and settlers are like depicted too is like, it's good to have those. It's like in the Jurassic Park movie or the Twister movie, you need evil scientists. Well, in this in the movie with people versus alien, you need some evil humans, and I thought that those French characters were a great choice because they're doing some pretty nasty shit, and it's hard to like them in any way. So it's fun to see them get shredded. There's an extended scene where they just get totally, like, one after another taken down by the Predator, and it's a really crazy scene because it really is. Okay, here's about 10 inventive, kind of different kills, and that's one thing I gotta say I respect about the Predator. He seems to like to do a different kind of kill. Like, he doesn't want any 2 kills in a row to be exactly the same. And sometimes he'll let you get a shot off before he, comes up and cuts your head off. I respect that. And to your point, Steve, the character of the Predator actually emerges a little bit over this movie too. Maybe not more so than other movies, but definitely, if that's a theme of Predator, is that you sense when the Predator is like wounded or when he's got to be resourceful. You do sense this Predator's kind of the respect he's maybe forming for the heroine. Like, while she's learning about how to fight him, he's learning that she's a threat, and I think that's kind of a cool trajectory.
Yeah, for sure.
Really cool, man.
If you haven't seen it yet, definitely like a recommend, I think, from all of us, if you have Hulu, to check it out. It's definitely worth your time. So it's funny because I feel like I've seen way more about Prey in any kind of conversation than I've seen about Bullet Train, which was like the big release last week. Even though I want to see Bullet Train,
I do too.
Me too.
It's just kind of crazy that like my whole feed and people just out in my work like talking about Prey, and I think there's something to say for that. So I mean, it's something that's worth your time and definitely recommend it. Um, Ronald, you wanted to mention another. Well, I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. But you wanted to mention that you had another show, or was it a series you wanted to mention?
Yeah, this today, as you were listening to this, Hulu has dropped another show that is just working on all levels, and that is This Fool. Um, and it's done by Krista Strada, stand-up comic. It's basically about a group called Hugs Not Thugs that rehabilitates gang members, former gang members, drug addicts, and the way to bring them together is through the discipline of uh, baking cupcakes, and it just is. It highlights gang culture in a way that I just have never seen before. There's like this funny sort of scene where a gang member, it's in the trailer, where a gang member's trying to be convinced by the main character played by Chris Estrada, Julio, to kind of stop gang banging and join the group. And he's like, you sound like a bitch. He's like, the average lifespan of a gangster is 32. The average life of a bitch ass fool is 70. Sorry, it was 69 or 66, something like that. It's like it's that kind of humor that makes us very strong.
Right.
So I say the standouts are Julio, played by Chris Estrada, the guy that wrote and pretty much ran the show. Michelle Ortiz, his ex-girlfriend. His cousin is getting out of jail the first episode, and he's trying to convince him to go into Hugs Not Thugs, who's played by Frankie Quenez. He is really, really funny, man. He is kind of the centerpiece of the humor besides Julio's character. And then what the hell? And then there's Michael Imperioli, who runs the program, man. He's like a conspiracy theorist, uh hates the establishment, but also needs money from the establishment to keep the program going. So he is a fucking force in this show. And he grounds it because he's kind of the unbiased party in a lot of the conflicts that take place. And it is comic gold, man. Like it's one of the best shows I've seen in the past 10 years, hands down.
Wow.
Worth checking out.
That comes out today.
Comes out today. I think it's 10 episodes. It's 10 dense half an hour episodes, like laughing from start to finish kind of episodes. I don't know how they pulled it off.
Cool. Yeah, definitely check that out.
Yeah, cool.
All right, cool, man. Let's wrap it up. Movieschmovie.com is the website. You can hit that up and subscribe. If whatever podcast platform you use, we should be able to link you to it right from there. You can even listen to the past episodes right there on that website, and also jump to the social medias from there. If you want to go to the YouTube page and subscribe for the videos that Ronald puts together, make sure you hit subscribe and the little bell so you get notifications when the new ones come out. Otherwise, we'll be back next week again. The required viewing for next week, if you want to watch along, is called Animal Kingdom from 2010. Not the TV show, the movie. And we'll talk about that next week. But we'll talk to you then. And as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.